Welcome back. If you've seen some of my videos, you know I'm always talking Rad Rover. But I recently bought a Himiway cruiser. And today I'm going to upgrade this from 17.5 amp hour to 27.5 amp hour for under $200. I'm going to do that with this battery right here. This is a 10 amp hour battery, 48 volt. And I got it for $158 on eBay. I'm sure it's not the best quality battery in the world. It's not going to last 900 cycles like Himiway says their battery does. But if I get a couple years use out of this battery and I've spent less than $200 doing the upgrade, I'll be happy. The mileage you get on the bike is pretty good, but once you unlock the throttle and you start zooming around at 30 miles an hour, you really lose a lot of your range. So that's why I'm going to upgrade the battery. Now I've already upgraded my Rad Rover battery. I put a triangle battery, 20 amp triangle, down here. And then I took the existing Rad Rover battery, which is this right here, and I mounted it on the back of my Rad Rover, and that's how I wired it in. But I lost my bag back here. What do I do with my tube and tools and pump? So this battery that's only 10.5 inches long, 2 3/4 that way, 3 inches that way, fits in your standard bag easily. I could fit a few of these in here if I wanted to. I can put this battery in here. I can fit a tube, a pump, tools, and 2 water bottles in here. I'm also going to cover in this video, if you have an existing battery, maybe it's 52 volt or 48 off an old bike, or if you want to upgrade to 52, how do you do that? Can you run parallel at the same time? How do you wire a switch in there if you want to switch from one battery to the other and not run parallel? I'm going to cover all that in this video. So regardless if you're upgrading your battery or running dual battery, we're going to need to splice into this cable that goes from the battery tray to the controller. It's hard to see, but it's this little cable right here, and there's hardly any of it exposed. So the next thing we're going to do is take off this tray and pull this out and see if there's any extra wire or what we got in here, how we're going to splice in. Because there's not enough room right now on this wire to put our connectors on. To remove the battery tray, there are 6 hex bolts. I have the battery tray loose now. We're going to flip the bike over to get to the wiring harness on the bottom. We're going to pull this battery tray out, and we're going to see if we can find some extra wire in here to splice into. So this is what it looks like in here. There's a tie wrap right here. I'm going to have to cut this tie wrap. The cables are coming out from this little slot right here. So I don't know which cable I have to pull out yet, but I'm going to carefully remove this tie wrap right here. Now I want to remove the battery tray. I'm pulling on this cable down here. I'm trying to figure out which one of these cables up here that it corresponds to. But I can't feel it. The wire might be tucked up inside and then come back down. That's what I suspect. But by looking at the thickness of the cable on the battery tray and the way the wire looks, I think it's this center wire in the middle here. So I'm just going to go ahead and gently pull on this. Sure enough, that is the connector for the battery tray. Okay, so what I've done here is I pulled out the tray, and there was a bunch of wire stuffed up into the tube, and then it comes back down. So you probably have an extra 6 inches of wire on your battery tray. It's installed. I used to have that much wire showing. Now I have this whole 8 inches of wire here, and I have room where I'm going to put my connector in now on this battery tray cable. And I just have to decide exactly where I want to make my cut. I'm going to leave about 3 inches here coming out of the bottom of the battery tray. So I'm going to cut the wire right here. So I'm connected to the controller. This battery cable here is plugged in. So you could have juice stored in the capacitor in your controller. So try to turn your bike on, and it momentarily will flash on and off as it discharges. Otherwise, when you cut this wire right here, you would get a spark. Damage is done. So now I have my cable cut down here to the length I want. We're going to pull it all back out again and solder on our connectors. I have the battery tray now with the cut cable that I need to put a connector on. And I've decided on the XT90 connector. This is a really high quality 90 amp connector, and a lot of manufacturers use it for their e-bike battery connectors. It comes in black or yellow. The black ones I only can find on eBay. The yellow ones you can get on Amazon. I'll put a link to the yellow ones. They also come with a spark arrestor if you want. There's a resistor in series here that it will make contact with the resistor first before it makes full contact with your battery. And that way, if you have a load on the other side, the spark won't be that big. It will just be a small spark. But you don't have to worry about that. If you buy the spark arrested ones or not, you're not going to be plugging these in multiple times a day where we're going to arc the connector. So I wouldn't worry about that. If you buy the spark arrested ones, fine, don't worry about it. I'm going to be using the black connector today so that it's harder to notice that I have it on there. It's going to match perfectly. So this is the cable that came off of my battery tray here. So it just so happens to be the exact same cable off of the Rad Rover. When I upgraded my Rad Rover battery to dual battery, this is the cable that came with it. So you can also get a replacement cable. This is from Bolton e-bikes. Same cable. I have the female connector soldered to the battery. You always put the female on the battery side. So on the controller side, I'm going to put a male connector. So in soldering these connectors on, I have a problem getting enough heat out of a 25 watt iron here. You're holding it on there too long and you just don't get a good clean melt all the way, because you're also getting the strength for this cable here. If somebody yanks on the wire, you don't want the solder joint to break. So you really want to get a good connection. So I'm using this, it's 100 watt, 150 watt, depending on how hard you pull the trigger. It's 2-position trigger. This will melt it almost instantaneously. And this is about, I think I paid 38 bucks for this. This is a Weller high power soldering iron. we're done with the first part now. We have the battery tray and the connector going to the controller all set to go. If we wanted to, we could just remount this back in there and we're back to original here. But this is where we're going to plug in our second battery, either by a switch or to run parallel. I'm going to run parallel. I have a 48 volt battery here, and this is a 48 volt battery. And if we charge them up to the same voltage, we can hook them up in parallel and then run them as one battery. So on my generic battery, I've gone ahead and I've changed the connector out to an XT90, and also I've added a XT90 charge port, because once I plug this in, I don't want to be in my bag unplugging the main cable. I can just reach in there and charge it through this port. And then on my charger, I've gone ahead and put the same connector on there as well. And I left those yellow just so I know that there's a charge port. So what do we have here? This is the battery here. Let me go ahead and put that on. All ready to go. So what we have here now, this is the battery that's mounted in the normal spot on the bike. This is the cable coming up through the frame. And then this is my battery that's on my rack. And I'm going to make an extension cable. I'm going to make an extension cable that has black connectors on it. But this is the extension cable off of my Rad Rover. That's wired the exact same, of course. So this is going to come down the tube. And now we have two batteries coming down here. If we want to, the simplest thing we can do, if you're not going to be using your dual battery very much, you might want to just keep this in the bag and you can just keep it all coiled up in there and run your main battery all the time. And when this gets low, if you're in an emergency, you just unplug this, go in your bag, feed your wire down, and then plug in your backup battery. You could do that. But if you want to leave it plugged in all the time, we're going to run parallel. So first I'll talk about parallel, then I'll talk about wiring up a switch. So this is our parallel connector right here. You don't have to make a Y connector. This already has two males to a female. All the negatives are wired together and all the positives are wired together. So all we have to do is plug these two batteries in here. And once I plug this one in, they are connected together. And they are one bigger battery than they were before. And they will drain together and they will charge together. And you only have to plug in one of them to charge it because they're connected together. So before I plug this in and hook them up in parallel, they have to be very close to the same voltage. It's not like a lead acid battery in a car where you can just jump it with another battery and let it charge for a while. These will instantly want to equalize, especially if one is completely discharged and one is charged all the way. There's like a 10 volt difference. They're really not 48. They have an operating voltage of like 54 to 43 or something like that. This 10, 11 volt range they have. And if you connect them when one is down here and one is here, they instantly are going to want to meet in the middle. And you are only allowed to discharge the battery so fast, so many amps allowed out before you overheat the batteries. And you're also allowed only so many charge amps in before you overheat the batteries. You don't want to do that. And it might not blow up on you, but you're shortening the life of your batteries when you abuse them by putting too much current in or out at one time. So that's why we're going to make sure that they're at equal potentials before we hook them together. So I went ahead and charged both of these batteries to full charge. That's one way I know that they'll be close to the same potential. So this battery here (54.5 volts, fully charged). This one, 54.5 volts. So we're going to go ahead and hook them up in parallel. And then this would be the cable going down the tube. Into the tube. Now we have 27.5 amp hours of juice that we can use here. I just mounted everything up to see how my cables fit when I run parallel. And I have one small problem. This is my parallel connector. Remember, we have 2 males and a female. The 2 males are where the batteries plug in because the batteries are always female. And if you remember, the controller is male and that plugs into the bottom. So my problem is that imagine this is mounted on the frame and then this tube is going up here. If we scooch this up all the way, as far as we can get this way, because there's a lot of adjustment here, we can get about 3/4 of an inch right here between this tube and the battery tray. So this mounts down here. Well, now this connector has to come up here and turn 90 degrees down to be able to plug into here. And I got 3/4 of an inch here, and this doesn't really fit. I want this connector to come up to the bottom as well. And to do that, I have to make my own parallel connector. This is the new connector that I made here. I made it in black. So the old connector had on top 2 males, and on the bottom had the female that connected to the controller. And we wanted to move one of these to the bottom so we could connect the battery to the bottom side, not to the top. So now the top only has 1 battery connection, and then the bottom has the female for the controller and the other battery connection, which is a male. So both of them have 2 males, but now the males are just on different sides on this one. So it's the same 3 connectors, just arranged a little bit differently. And I'll show you how to make this. So to make this connector, we need 2 males and a female. 2 males and a female. Now we need the opposites to plug into while we're soldering so that the pins don't melt and turn. So I'm going to use the yellow ones as the opposites so that we don't get them confused. So this one's going to go here. And I need females. So I got the positive sides lined up, male and a female. Now we need to get this positive side, and this doesn't quite fit in here. It doesn't quite go down the middle. I'm going to slightly bend these in just a hair. Okay. Now I'm going to attempt to solder these. Jesus. I'm going to try this side. I think that's pretty good. So now I just need to pull out the yellow connectors and then put some heat shrink on there. I'll show you how to do that. The heat shrink that I'm going to put on this connector is called 1-inch thin wall black heat shrink. And I had to buy $4.50 worth for this 1 inch that I need here. So we're going to slide this over. And there's a sleeve that fits over the female connector. So we really don't want to block it any further than that. But if it goes over there, I can just trim it off. Perfect. So I have the bike finished for dual battery parallel. And this is what it looks like. So you can see I flipped that connector around, my parallel connector. Now I have both these cables coming up from the bottom here. And then there's my cable. I have it tie wrapped up here. And I have it going into the bag. You can barely even notice it's there. And now I have 27.5 amp hours. Now I'm going to show you how you use a switch to change between the two batteries. And this is really convenient if you have a 52 volt battery and the Himiway 48 volt battery, because you cannot run those in parallel. You have to use a single pole double throw switch, and the easiest way to do that is use a 3-way house switch. This is the kind of switch where you use 2 switches to control one light, and there's not an on and off on the switch. The only problem with using this is we're going to have to figure out how to insulate it and mount it. And it's not going to look that clean of an installation if you ask me, but we're going to try it. So the way we wire this is there is one screw on the switch that is different than the other screws. This one is black, and that is your output that was going to go to the controller. And then the 2 gold or copper colored are the inputs that we wire the 2 positives from the battery. Then all we do is wire all the negatives are going to be wired together. Those don't get switched. We don't even put them on the ground here. We're just connecting the positives to here. The two batteries here and the output here. Real briefly, the wire I'm using is called silicon wire. It's very flexible. There's a lot of strands inside and the insulation is very durable. And it comes red and black. You can get just 5 feet. 12 gauge is what I'm using from Amazon, and I'll leave a link. What I have here is the switch wired with all the positive cables connected. All of the negatives are going to be connected together. So I have to find a way of splicing these 3 negatives together and not have it touch any of the positives, obviously. So what I decided to do here is I'm just going to use some regular heat shrink that I had laying around here. So I'm going to put 1 piece of heat shrink over that side. I'm going to use double heat shrink just to make sure it doesn't wear out or anything. So now I'm going to just kind of do a splice right there and then slide the heat shrink over it. So wish me luck. Woo! Smoking. That's the first piece of heat shrink. Now I'm going to slide over the second piece of heat shrink just to make sure. So now I have the switch all wired and I ohmed it out and it's wired correctly. I have to figure out a way to insulate this and mount it on the bike. So what I think I'm going to do is put it inside of an inner tube. So first I'm going to poke a hole in the middle here. Well, another thing I'm going to do, I'm going to get rid of these tabs. I don't need these tabs on here. I'm going to go out and cut these off. I don't need those. And once this goes in here, that's going to fit tight over the switch. Enough that it should keep water out. And then I just plan on tie wrapping these around the wires here and leaving enough slack in here that this switch works. And then I'm going to have this tie wrapped to the down tube. Now I'll just reach down and flip my switch when I want to switch batteries. So I can't keep this too tight or else the switch won't. It might pull the switch down automatically, you know. So leave a little slack in here to make sure that the switch is going to work. That's the best idea I can come up with to insulate this. So this is our finished switch assembly. I've got it a tube tie wrapped on there. I'm using a 3-inch tube is what I had laying around. I tried a tighter tube and it didn't work. You have to have a lot of slop on it. I changed my wire lengths of my cable once I went out to the bike. If you have too much wire hanging down, there's no place to put it. You're just going to have it bulging out. So you want to have these exact lengths. And then I was going to put a cable coming out the top and then use my extension cable that I had from my parallel that I made. And the extension cable is just a male to a female. But I just decided to make it one long cable going up to my bag and to my external battery. Again, the 2 battery connectors are male, and the output is the female. And the output is the one you have wired to the oddball pin. Input from each battery, and we don't use the ground. And also, I forgot to mention, you can find 15 or 20 amp switches at your hardware store, and do not use a 15 amp switch because we're probably drawing more than 15 amps and it wouldn't last very long. The 20 amp I wouldn't even use. It'll last for a while, I'm sure. But what I have in here, I went out and I got a 30 amp industrial switch. They will not sell them at your local hardware store. You have to get them at an industrial supply or online. So let's go out and fit this on the bike and see what it looks like. Let's take a look at the Himiway with the switch installed. Now I could have put some heat shrink over these red wires and then you wouldn't be able to see them. That would look better. But you can see the 2 wires coming up down here to the 2 connectors. Right there. Here's our cable out to the back battery, going into the bag. And so I disconnected the back battery and I figured out that up is the back battery and down is the front battery. At least that's the way I wired mine. Looks a little rough, but it works. This last point I cannot stress enough. If you make one mistake while you're wiring, you're going to fry something. Most likely, if you wire your battery backwards, you will fry your controller. Or if you plug it into your battery charger first, you'll fry your battery charger. So you have to check and double check and triple check your wiring. Remember that the connectors have a plus side and a minus side. And that's the first thing, is the red wire going to all the plus sides on all of your cables and connectors. And then ohm them all. Do not make a mistake. And I know this is a fairly complicated process. So I decided to put together a kit that will make it a lot easier to wire if you want to run dual battery. I'm not going to put together a kit that uses the switch. I showed you how to wire that, but I'm not going to put together a kit for that. My kit is going to include a Bolton e-bike connector. You do not have to use this. I did not use one of these connectors when I just wired up my bike. I just cut the existing connector in half, and that gave me barely enough room to get my wires out. If you use this cable, again, it's the same connection at the controller. Now you have a whole bunch of wire coming up. You have plenty of room to wire your connectors and get them in and out. And then the cable that's hanging off of your battery tray is going to be this long. And all you have to do is cut off the connector and splice one of the black connectors on there, and then you have plenty of room on the battery, and you won't be limited like I was with these short cables. So I'm going to include this cable, but I'm going to put a black connector on it, and I'm going to put heat shrink over the wire so you can't see that, because that's kind of ugly when you see it on your bike. I'm going to include the special parallel connector that has a male on both sides. Online on Amazon or eBay, you only can find them that have both males on one side. So I'm going to include this. I am going to include an extension cable, 2 foot, so that will get you up to the back rack. And then I'm going to include 2 of the female connectors you need to finish the wiring. So this cable is going to go on the bottom. Your extension cable plugs in here. And then all you need to do is on your battery, your existing battery plugs in down here, and I'll give you the connector for that. And then your rack battery that's in your bag needs one more connector, and I'll supply you with that. And then this is every single thing you need to run parallel right here. And I put this together as a kit. I'll put 10 of them together. I've ordered 10 of these cables from Bolton e-bikes, and I've talked to Kyle and told him what I'm doing, and he's cool with it. And then if these sell, I'll put together some more kits. But if they don't sell, I'll stop listing them. But it's going to be on eBay. I know that was a long video, but I wanted to cover every single thing that there was about the Himiway battery wiring. So now you know every single thing that I know about the Himiway dual battery. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you on down the trail.